Rain had been tapping against the window for an hour by the time I realized I hadn't even finished my coffee. The small ceramic mug felt heavier than usual, almost like it wanted me to notice it, or maybe just me. I was sitting at the corner table of the little cafe downstairs, the one with the peeling varnish and mismatched chairs, staring at the slow spiral of cream in my black coffee. She was there again, just past the door, shaking off the umbrella. I'd seen her a few times before, just passing each other in the hall or the stairwell, but today she stopped by the counter at the same moment as me. "Large cappuccino?" she asked, eyes lifting briefly toward me. Yeah, the usual," I said, fumbling a little with my wallet. Her smile lingered longer than it needed to, the corner of her mouth tilting just enough that I noticed. She took her drink, leaned against the counter, and for a second, she looked older than her years. Lines around her eyes, hair just catching the cafe light, but not in a bad way. Just real. Human. I couldn't tell if it was me, or the way the rain softened everything outside. I watched her, fingers wrapped around her mug, the slight tilt of her wrist as she took a sip. I caught myself folding my napkin twice, then stopping, pretending it mattered. "Busy morning?" I said, because saying anything else felt too risky. "Sort of. The storm makes everything slow, though," she said. Her voice didn't carry, but it didn't need to. It had that quiet presence, like it belonged in a room without asking permission. I nodded, looking down at my coffee, stirring it without thinking. The spoon made a soft clink against the cup. She glanced at me, then away, then back, just long enough that it felt like she was seeing through the edges I kept tucked in. I tried to remember if I'd told her my name the last time, or if I even knew hers. Maybe I hadn't asked. It didn't feel urgent, yet somehow it did. I caught her eyes again, and the way she tilted her head when something in the cafe distracted her. A laugh, soft, too quick, escaped her, like she caught herself before it could get louder. I realized I'd been staring longer than polite. My hand hovered over my coffee, then flicked toward my knee. Micro-moments. I noticed her thumb tapping lightly against the cup, almost nervous, almost casual. When she moved to the door, I almost said something. Anything. But the words stuck halfway, like the storm had swallowed them. She paused at the threshold. "Hey," she said, low, like she was deciding whether to leave or stay. I blinked, caught somewhere between curiosity and hesitation. "Do you ever hate sleeping alone when it storms?" she asked, voice just above the patter of rain. I stared. The question wasn't dramatic. It wasn't flirtation exactly. It was a confession wrapped in a pause. A doorway she'd opened, wide enough for me to step into, or maybe just look through. Before I could answer, she was gone, the bell over the door chiming a soft goodbye. I sat there, stirring my coffee, noticing the empty chair across from me. The steam curled, and I thought about how small the world felt, how quietly sudden it could be. I didn't text her. I didn't even know if I could. I just folded the napkin once more, eyes flicking toward the door, waiting for some echo of her presence, or a message that hadn't come yet. Something in the pause, the unfinished sentence between us, made me realize I wanted to know how the story would start. And then, my phone buzzed. The storm hadn't let up. I was halfway through reheating a cold slice of pizza when there was a soft knock at my door. I froze, unsure if I was imagining things. Another knock, slightly firmer. I opened it to find her standing there, coat damp, hair sticking slightly at the nape of her neck. She held a small thermos in one hand. "I thought, maybe you'd like some tea," she said, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. "It's, green. You like green, right?" I nodded, and she stepped inside without waiting for a full invitation. The smell of rain followed her in, wet and earthy. I moved to the counter to heat water, pretending I wasn't aware of how close she was. We sat on opposite ends of the small living room, her knees drawn slightly to her chest. She poured the tea carefully, like it mattered. I watched her hands, how she wrapped them around the cup, how her thumb brushed the rim absent-mindedly. "You ever keep things you shouldn't?" she asked suddenly, her eyes fixed somewhere behind me. I mean, not physical stuff. Just memories, little regrets. I laughed softly, maybe too loud. Yeah, I said. I have a drawer. Old letters, postcards, random things I never sent or did anything with. She tilted her head. Letters you never sent. Yeah, to people I don't know. Shouldn't have written to, I guess. There it was. That small flicker of risk. Our age gap. The fact she lived upstairs. That she had a life. Kids. Ex-husband. Details I didn't need to catalog to feel the weight of them. But still, I felt the pull of telling her something real. Something small but true. She smiled, a brief twitch of lips. I have a box like that too, she said quietly. Mostly memories I can't look at in the daylight. But nights, they're easier. We drank in silence for a few moments, listening to the rain against the window. I imagined a dozen scenarios, her leaning closer to hand me the thermos, her fingers brushing mine accidentally, the sound of her voice low in this apartment that suddenly felt smaller, more intimate than it had any right to. I told myself to stop thinking, but the pause between us was loud. Her gaze caught mine, then darted away. I wondered if she noticed the way my hand twitched over the cup, or how my stomach tightened like a string being pulled slowly. Then she laughed softly at something. Maybe my awkward stir of the tea, maybe the pause in my reply. The laugh wasn't for me, exactly, but it landed on me. She touched my forearm lightly as she shifted her cup, and it was like the air had changed. Not electric, not loud, just meaningful. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. I thought as I watched her take a slow sip. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. She didn't look at me then, but the corner of her eyes caught mine in the reflection of the teacup. And I knew, whatever this was, it was quietly dangerous, and I wanted it anyway. I hadn't expected her at my door again. Rain still drummed the windows, but this time, I hesitated before answering. My hand lingered on the doorknob, half afraid, half hoping. She smiled, small and slightly apologetic. You're here? I thought maybe. Her words trailed, unfinished, like the pause between us had swallowed them. I stepped aside, letting her in. She hung her wet coat over the chair, eyes flicking toward the stack of unopened letters on my counter. I noticed her noticing, and my stomach tightened. We ended up in the living room again, tea in hand. But this time, the silence was different, thicker, heavier. I felt it in the small movements. The way she shifted in her seat, curling one leg under her, then stretching it out again. The way I kept picking at the corner of my napkin. I should probably go, she said suddenly. Not leaving, not exactly, but enough to signal hesitation. I nodded, not sure if I was relieved or disappointed. Okay, I said, though my voice felt too loud in the quiet room. She lingered, though, fingers brushing the cup, looking anywhere but at me. I imagined her leaning closer, imagined the warmth of her hand over mine, and my heart skipped. Then she pulled back, crossing her arms, eyes dropping to the floor. The phone buzzed on the table. A friend's name flashed, and I realized for the first time that someone else knew we were talking. Someone who might notice, who might comment, who might complicate everything. My hand hovered over it. Then I set it down, pretending not to care. Funny, she said, voice low. I never thought I'd end up sitting here, like this. I wanted to ask what she meant. I wanted to tell her I felt the same. But I only nodded, sipping my tea. The warmth was comforting, but fleeting. We drifted into silence, listening to the rain. My thoughts tumbled. What if she was just being polite? What if I was imagining more than existed? What if? Her gaze found mine suddenly, and the room shrank. Not a question, not a statement, just eyes that lingered too long. I leaned forward, almost without thinking. She mirrored me, a breath away. My heart thudded in uneven bursts. The air between us held a sort of fragile tension. I felt her inhale, saw her hand inch closer to mine, then pull back slightly. A laugh, nervous, soft. Maybe I should go, she murmured again, words barely audible. Her fingers brushed mine as she moved to stand. Just a brush, almost accidental. But it lingered longer than any brush should. My hand hovered in the air, wanting to follow, wanting to close the gap, wanting to ask what she wanted. And then the moment passed. Rain hit the window with a louder drum, a kind of punctuation, and she stepped back fully, shaking the hesitation from her shoulders. I sat there, cup in hand, thinking, maybe this is as close as it gets for now. Or maybe not. The streets were wet, darkened by the storm, and the air smelled of damp asphalt and leaves. We walked side by side, jackets zipped too high, scarves tugged tight, but neither of us speaking much. The rhythm of our footsteps matched the drumming rain overhead. She glanced at me once, eyes soft, then back at the street. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words got caught, tangled in the quiet that had become our language. A car passed, headlights reflecting off puddles, and I noticed her flinch slightly. Small, almost imperceptible, but enough to make my chest tighten. I imagined her in 100 situations, alone or with someone else, and felt the prick of jealousy I hadn't admitted, even to myself. We paused at a bench under a flickering streetlight. She sat first, shoulders hunched. I followed, sitting close but careful not to crowd. My hands rested on my knees, restless. Her fingers fiddled with the strap of her bag, absent-mindedly, or maybe deliberately avoiding mine. She started, voice low, trailing off. Then she cleared her throat. I hate that this feels complicated. I know it shouldn't, but it does. I swallowed. I wanted to reassure her, to tell her I felt it too, but all I could manage was a nod, the corners of my mouth tight. It's just, she took a slow breath, as if preparing to let something slip. I don't know if I'm allowed to feel like this. The rain softened, drizzling now, and I watched the droplets slide down her coat. I imagined touching them, imagined her hand brushing mine, imagined the quiet collapse of all boundaries. My heart thudded against my ribs in uneven pulses. I've tried not to think about it, she admitted, voice barely audible. But it keeps slipping in. You. Here. Now. Her eyes found mine, steady but trembling, like she was holding something fragile. I felt my own defenses falter, a dangerous tug in my chest. I imagined saying her name, imagined saying the words that would make everything undeniable. But they stayed in my throat, stuck, hesitant. The bench shifted under her, a small movement, and my fingers itched to close the space between us. I noticed the faint scent of her shampoo in the damp air, the slight tremor in her hands. Do you ever, she began, voice dropping even lower. Think about what it would be like if she stopped. The words hung, unfinished, like smoke curling in the dark. My own lips parted, ready to finish them, but I hesitated. Too close. Too real. A pause. The streetlight flickered again. I watched her, and in the silence, I understood. Whatever happened next could not be taken back. And yet, I wanted it. The question hovered between us, unspoken, aching. What if we did? She didn't knock that night. Not at the door, not at my apartment, not anywhere I might have expected. I waited, reheating my tea twice, staring at the empty chair across from me. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets shiny and quiet, and somehow it made the absence feel louder. I tried her number. Twice. No response. I didn't text. Not yet. Part of me wanted to wait. Part of me wanted to scream into the phone. Instead, I sat there, hands wrapped around a warm mug, pretending the steam could fill the gap. When she did appear again, it wasn't like before. She was brisk, polite, distant. Something in her smile felt practiced, a little too careful, like a curtain she'd drawn too tight. She set down a thermos on my counter, not meeting my eyes, and said, I thought you'd like some tea. It was green, the same as last time. I noticed her hands, fingers flicking over the rim, tightening on the handle, and realized it wasn't casual. Her usual warmth, the slight tremor that hinted at what she wanted but wouldn't say, was gone. I didn't reach for it. I couldn't. Everything okay? I asked, voice cautious. Just busy, she replied. Her eyes moved somewhere beyond me, landing on nothing, maybe avoiding the question, maybe avoiding me. I wanted to ask why. Wanted to pull her back into the quiet intimacy we'd built, but I stopped myself. I didn't know what she was holding back, or if it was even meant for me. Later, I learned why. By accident. A conversation in the hall, a passing mention, a child. A weekend with her daughter. A birthday she'd forgotten to tell me about. Something I should have known, something that shifted everything without anyone saying a word. I felt paused. Not heartbroken, not furious, just suspended in the silence she'd left behind. A dull ache that wasn't sharp but lingered, occupying the spaces I'd imagined her in. I imagined her walking in on her own terms, eyes soft, apologizing for the absence. I imagined laughter spilling across the apartment, the brush of her hand against mine. Then I imagined her remembering the real world waiting outside, stepping back. The day passed. I didn't call, didn't text. I couldn't. Every message I drafted stayed in my drafts folder, unsent, hovering like the words had been paused midair. I stared at the empty chair. The kettle boiled itself in the background. The tea cooled in my mug. I realized that life hadn't ended, hadn't broken, hadn't even skipped a beat. It had just left me there, waiting. And I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. She showed up late that evening, carrying nothing but a small umbrella, damp from the drizzle that had started again. I'd been sitting at the kitchen counter, fingers drumming lightly against the chipped surface, pretending I wasn't waiting. I noticed her hesitation the second she stepped inside. She didn't smile at first, just stood in the doorway, jacket clutched in both hands, eyes flicking to the floor, then back at me. "Hey," I said, voice low. Too low, maybe, but enough to fill the quiet. "Hi," she murmured. A single syllable, nothing more. We moved slowly toward the kitchen table, sitting across from each other. The kettle hissed on the stove, the only noise in the small space. Steam curled between us, fragile and transient. She started, then stopped. Her hand twitched at the edge of the table, almost reaching for mine. I wasn't sure if I should come. I nodded, trying not to betray the tightness in my chest. "I wasn't sure if I wanted you to." She let out a small laugh, uneven, and I could see the tension in her shoulders start to melt. "Funny," she said. "I thought maybe we were both pretending a little too hard." I looked down at my hands. "I've been pretending a lot," I admitted quietly. Pretending the pauses didn't matter, pretending the drafts weren't, unsent for a reason. She leaned forward slightly, her fingers brushing the edge of mine. Not a bold touch, just enough to notice. "Me too," she whispered. And suddenly, the air between us felt alive. Not charged or electric. Not dangerous. Just real. "I was afraid," she said, "of what it would mean if I said it." Her eyes met mine, steady but vulnerable. I didn't want to ruin everything else. I swallowed, thinking of all the missed moments, all the hesitations, all the pauses that had stretched between us like a thin rope. "I was afraid too," I admitted, "of losing what little we have. But I think maybe it's worth the risk." We sat like that for a long moment, not touching, not speaking, but acknowledging each other in a way words couldn't fully hold. The kettle hissed, the rain tapped against the window, and everything else, the world, obligations, doubts, slipped away. Finally, she exhaled, small and calm. Her fingers grazed mine this time, deliberate. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay," I replied. No flourish, no grand gestures. Just the quiet recognition that we'd crossed the pause, the hesitation, the unsent letters. That for now we were here. I noticed the way her thumb rested briefly on my hand. Just a touch, just a moment. But it carried more than words ever could. And that was enough. Weeks passed. The storm that had brought her to my door felt distant now, but its echo lingered in small ways. The bench outside the park where we'd paused during the drizzle became ours, not marked or reserved, just quietly habitual. Mornings were easier, somehow. I'd brew black coffee at exactly 8:47 a.m., and she'd appear shortly after, carrying her thermos. No words were necessary at first. Just a nod, a shared smile, a pause in the routine that felt more significant than anything grand could have been. She had a tendency to fold the corner of her napkin when thinking, and I noticed it again, as I always did. I'd pretend not to, but my eyes flicked toward her hands. Small gestures mattered now, carrying weight they hadn't before. We didn't need declarations or overblown confessions. Our conversations were clipped, sometimes awkward, often unfinished, but full of meaning. A joke that lingered, a shared glance, the clink of cups. One evening, we sat on the park bench again, rainlight reflecting off puddles, a quiet drizzle in the air. She pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders, and I draped mine over the back of the bench so she could share the warmth. She didn't comment. I didn't either. It was enough. "I think I like this," she said quietly after a while. Not about me, not about us, but about the quietness of it, the way life had slowed just enough to notice each other. "I do too," I said. Not a proclamation, just honesty. Days blurred, but not in a way that erased the memory of our stormy beginnings. Tea in mismatched mugs, green and black, back-to-back mornings of silence and half-conversations, small touches that lingered, everything threaded through the ordinary fabric of life. I realized that love didn't have to be dramatic to feel monumental. It didn't need storms or confessions shouted over rain. Sometimes it was simply sitting together on a bench, feeling seen in ways no one else noticed. She laughed softly at something I'd said, something meaningless, and I caught the warmth in her eyes. It wasn't the fire of beginnings or the tension of near confessions. It was steadiness, quiet, enduring. I smiled back, a little awkwardly, and for a moment, we both lingered in that exact place, letting everything else fall away. The storm had passed. The coffee cooled sometimes, the tea went untasted sometimes, but we stayed. Not perfect, not forever idyllic, but present, real, and enough. I watched her tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear and thought, finally, that maybe this is how it should have been all along. Only we would understand. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?